From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Friday the 22nd of July. Good afternoon. Today we'll be discussing some of the biggest stories from around the world, including some trouble in Papua New Guinea and a potential recall election for Britain's Prime Minister. We'll also be answering today's big question: what does the ECB's rate hike mean for Europe? But first, Ukraine and Russia have reached a deal. Ever since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February of this year, the world has struggled to meet the demand for grain. That's because Ukraine itself is a big grain exporter. And as part of the invasion, Ukraine has been forced to blockade the Black Sea, which makes continued grain exports basically impossible. Today, though, it seems that Turkey has brokered a deal between Russia and Ukraine that will allow Ukraine to start exporting grain once again. It's currently predicted that about 20 million tons of grain are currently in storage silos in Odessa, so there's a lot of grain to get out. Although details about the deal are sparse right now, it's suspected that as part of the deal will mandate that Russia agrees to a truce while exports occur, and that Turkey will inspect ships to allay Russian fears about weapon smuggling to Ukraine. Let's move to America, where it seems that the two most recent presidents are in a bit of a tricky situation. The incumbent, Joe Biden, has recently tested positive for COVID, while former President Trump is in much deeper trouble surrounding new January 6th revelations. The House Select Committee, tasked with investigating last year's Capitol riot, heard testimony that the ex-president watched the riot on TV in the White House, and simultaneously ignored pleas from both his children and his aides to act. It was revealed that Trump didn't make a single call to either law enforcement or national security staff. And the committee also saw a previously unseen outtake of Trump's public statement on the 17th of January, in which he stressed that he didn't want to say the election was over. The inquiry ultimately alleged that Trump was motivated by a selfish desire to stay in power. There's more on the way, but be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to make the daily briefing part of your everyday routine. Or you can just search for us in your podcast app to listen along. At a time when most European countries are cutting ties with Russia and seeking alternative sources of oil and gas, Hungary has sent its top diplomat to Moscow on a mission to increase the volume of gas that Hungary buys from Russia. Hungary's ruling Fidesz party has said that the government have decided to buy an additional 700 million cubic meters of natural gas from Russia in order to guarantee the security of Hungary's energy supply. Europe is also currently preparing for a difficult winter, as Moscow gradually turns off the gas taps into Europe. The Hungarian foreign minister's visit comes just a day after the EU proposed a plan to cut Europe's gas demand by 15%. Now, as a country reliant on Russian oil and gas imports, Hungary has been in opposition to all EU-wide sanctions on Russia's energy sector, with their Prime Minister saying that Europe has shot itself in the lungs with its sanctions. Next up, the United Nations has condemned an escalation of violence in Papua New Guinea during the last 2 weeks of the country's national election. Violence has already forced some 3,000 people to flee their homes in one province alone, with the UN adding that their sources have confirmed deaths, assaults, rapes, and an extensive destruction of property and infrastructure taking place across the highlands. Therefore, some fear that this year's election could be equally or more violent than the last vote in 2017, during which 200 people died. In fact, only on Wednesday, 18 people were allegedly killed in an attack between warring tribes, and the area's police chief conceded that the police's presence in the area was inadequate. Paul Barker from the Institute of National Affairs described the situation as being down to poor election administration, but also said that there remains a strong eagerness to campaign and vote. So, although a flawed democracy, PNG remains a vibrant one. Finally today, Boris Johnson has had a pretty humiliating week. And unfortunately for him, things look like they're only getting worse. In a few weeks, the Prime Minister will no longer have the trappings of high office and will revert to being a run-of-the-mill backbench Tory MP. But the thing is that the scandals which engulfed his premiership won't go away quite as quickly. Most notably, the Privileges Committee will still investigate whether he misled Parliament over his comments about parties in Number 10 during lockdown. If the committee decides that an appropriate punishment is at least 10 days suspension from the House, then a recall election could be triggered. For this to happen, only 10% of his constituents would need to sign a petition calling for such an election, which doesn't feel all that unlikely. This could be particularly worrying for Johnson, as polling from earlier this year suggested that in a general election, Johnson could lose his seat anyway, so a by-election is all the more risky. That's all we have time for on YouTube today. But if you want more, including our discussion of the ECB's recent rate hike and what it means for Europe, then check out the extended version of the Daily Briefing exclusively on Nebula. Nebula subscribers not only get everything you've already watched ad-free, but also get an extended version of the show every single weekday. Available to watch on Nebula or to stream on your podcast app of choice. So if you want to support the channel and get an even more extensive briefing every day, then you'll want to sign up. And there's good news. Our friends at CuriosityStream, the streaming service with some of the world's best documentaries, is offering a deal whereby you can get both platforms, CuriosityStream and Nebula, for less than $15 a year. That's all the documentaries you could want on CuriosityStream, and then more TLDR on Nebula, including the extended briefing, other full exclusive TLDR videos, and, well, it's always ad-free too. Click the link below to get both services for less than $15 a year and support the channel.